Hello and welcome to a Celtic State of Mind podcast. I'm joined as always on this Friday afternoon by Tony Haggerty. How are you?
I'm very well, what yourself?
Not too bad, and we have the return of King Jim after his technical issues last week. We're glad to have you back. How you doing, Jim?
Afternoon, Laura. Afternoon, Tony. I've got my 50k modem. All set to go. Let's go. Two paper cups, a bit of string. Here we go.
Glad to have you here. Glad to have a full house anyway, because in case anybody hadn't been keeping score, I have to say I hadn't. It was Paul that reminded us, but it's actually episode 500, so we are officially the 500 club today. Episode 500 of A Celtic State of Mind. Got to say, I feel a bit awkward presenting it myself because I'm probably one of the shortest serving members of the team, but it's an achievement that everybody has contributed to in some way or another, not least Paul John Dykes, who is in the background today and started this whole thing from scratch. So Jim, I'll come to you first on the 500. What do you make of where the podcast started, where it's at now, and what it's done for you as a Celtic supporter?
I was chatting to Paul beforehand there, asking what his first podcast was and what his long-term plans are. So he's obviously a very ambitious guy. I think the podcast has been a godsend during this pandemic for Celtic fans. I'm not somebody who normally listens to podcasts, apart from this, obviously. But you can tell by the number of views, the number of comments, obviously there's loads of people tuning in. And it's good to have Celtic fans talking about Celtic. I mean, I no longer listen to Radio Clyde or Radio Scotland or read the newspapers because, I don't actually rate what most of them are saying. But when you have some of the contributors we have on here, I think they're well worth listening to, including Tony Haggerty, I must say. So, yeah, it's been great.
Well, I was going to say there are exceptions to the rule, but you think... Tony, what about you? You've relatively new to things, apart from your initial interviews, the same as me. What has it meant to you to be involved in it, and especially given the last year, the way things have gone? How has it been to be a part of the Celtic State of Mind team?
I can only echo what Jim said there. I think it has been a godsend to a lot of people during the pandemic, and I just think the wide spectrum of people on here and everybody that appears on this is quality and brings something to the table, where they're talking about something that's close to their heart and something that they love, and that's at Celtic Football Club. And I think, as Jim also said, the numbers that get tuned into this is staggering. And in terms of media, this is the way forward. A lot of people are getting their media fix from this, and they're doing what Jim's also did as well, and not reading newspapers, and they're not listening to mainstream radio programmes. It's a personal choice, isn't it, that you do that? But I think it's complimentary to the likes of everybody that appears on this pod. When you see those numbers and the thousands that people tune in and they enjoy, and the most flattering part of it all is that they seem to enjoy what we're saying. I think at one point I was called a cult icon. That's CULT icon. I just want to make that. But we don't take ourselves that seriously, and that love can come to hate very quickly. So, but things like that are very humbling and very flattering. And as I say, I think everybody that contributes to this pod is a quality person and brings a brilliant skill set to the table. So, I can only echo what Jim said there. I think a lot of people get enjoyment from it, so magic.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
I think also what people have missed, Laura.
Yeah.
Laura, I think what people have missed during the pandemic is the fact that they're not going to the pub with their mates, they're not having a chat to talk to like-minded Celtic supporters about the game. So the fact that so many people get involved in the chat room is really good. And I think I'd said, maybe after the first or second time I was on the podcast, it kind of feels like your virtual mates in the pub. And your kind of match day routine now is really, you'll stick on a Celtic State of Mind before the game at half-time and at full-time, because you feel as if that's you talking to your mates. If you want to get involved in the chat room, then you get involved in the chat room. And I think it's been a godsend for people. And then hopefully when things get back to normal at some point, that it still goes from strength to strength.
I can only echo what both of you have said. I think from a personal point of view, it's been especially this year more than any other, you feel very disconnected from things when you're not able to go to games, when you're not able to get together with family and friends to see matches. So this is the next best thing. But to echo what Jim said, to everybody who's watching today, everybody who's been subscribed since day one, or if this is the first time you're watching, then just say thank you very much for your contributions. We wouldn't have a show to do if you weren't watching it. Get involved in the comments. We're live on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube as always. And we are also part of the wider State of Mind media channel on YouTube, where there's lots to watch. So all this self-serving patting on the back and well done us aside, let's get back to what we're here to do, which is talk Celtic. Jim, obviously you weren't here last week, and Tony and I made our feelings known on the tweet that Celtic sent out. Now I know it's a bit of old news and it's probably been done to death, but since you didn't have a chance to air your thoughts, I was really interested to hear what you thought about it. I think the general consensus was that it was the sentiment behind it was understandable, but it maybe was a lack of professionalism behind it. Do you agree with that, or what were your thoughts on it?
Well, I was here in spirit last week, if not in body. I've just written it down. It was we're not half of anything. With a confused face, not our problem. # one club since 1888. I thought it was pathetic. Honestly, pathetic. I thought it was fake, which I think most people thought. And then when you find out it's not fake, you think, is there a 14-year-old kid running Celtic at the moment? With that kind of nonsense, And if Peter Law wanted to put a statement and put a real, genuine statement, when you put things like one club since 1888, are you trying to insinuate something? And if you're trying to insinuate something, then put it in a proper statement.
Yep.
Are you insinuating maybe there's another club who don't have an unbroken history? If that's the case, put it out. Because people like Douglas Park are laughing at you. They're laughing at you, they're laughing at Dermot Desmond, they're laughing at Celtic. Because any statement that comes out from Ibrox is always on the front foot. It's we demand, we insist. Whereas every Celtic statement you get is on the back foot. We are surprised. It's very poor language. And I think if Peter Law would put a statement covering the last 20 years before he leaves, covering all this stuff like the secret 5-way agreement, the European licence, all the stuff that happened in the early part of the 2000s that we all know very well about, and I got abused last time I mentioned this, put out that statement. Don't put a wee daft tweet. Put out that statement, right, before you go, because you know what? There's all these secrets that you've kept from the Celtic fans. But you put a wee daft tweet out. So put out a proper statement. I just think, I read a few weeks ago that Peter Law has earned something like £15 million from Celtic, a chief executive of a relatively small company that only turns over £60 to £70 million. £15 million. So anyway, the tweet was quite pathetic, I thought. Unbecoming of Celtic. Apart from that, it was fine, yeah.
Tony, to pick up on what Jim said there, we looked at that, and I spoke to you in messages during the time it went out. I got in touch with a couple of guys that I know have, access to people at the club, just to see if it was genuine for a start. We were sitting there kind of going, I didn't want to react to it and give my thoughts on it and anything in case it made me look stupid, that it was, as Jim said, some 14-year-old who's guessed the password and got in and made the statement. I think we kind of came to the conclusion that, regardless of all the semantics around language and what we call the other half of the city and what we believe about their history and what we believe about our history, as long as you know what the history is, does it really matter what language you use? I don't think so. And I thought that tweet just kind of embroiled us in another argument that we probably didn't need to be in. What was your thoughts on that?
Don't use a word there. Unbecoming. It's unbecoming of a club of Celtic's stature and nature to get involved on these petty, parochial point scoring. Basically, that's what it was. They did it with the Adidas thing, which I touched upon earlier as well. Not for second best, right? Whoever sanctioned that really should hang their head in shame, right? As I said last week, we know what Celtic are, we know who we are. Why bother about things that happen over the other side of the city? Concentrate on your own. Get your own house in order. Get what you're doing sorted. because see, as Jim said, I just think it's petty, and it is unbecoming of a club of Celtic stature. You see, you should be better than that. You have to be better than that. Be better than that. Bottom line, these things hold you back, and as you see, you get embroiled in utter nonsense. As Jim says, if they want to make some kind of statement, then make it. If they don't want to make a statement, then don't. Right, fine. Go away, walk off into the distance, fine. But I tell you what, that's a colossal amount of dough that man's taken from the club, isn't it? A colossal amount.
Also, there's a phrase that Kevin uses quite a lot: big boy pants. Right. So Peter Law, put your big boy pants on and put a proper statement. A proper statement.
If he's got a mind to and he wants to, so be it. But he probably won't be. But I think that's a brilliant word. It's unbecoming of a club of Celtic stature. Again, as I touched on in a couple of other podcasts, we're a big club, supposed to be a big club, but we're masquerading as a big club. Big clubs don't do that. We don't get involved in that. Right? Big clubs act with class. Celtic haven't.
Yeah. And Jim, just to pick up on that again, it's been something that's been talked about a little bit extensively, if that makes sense, over the past couple of weeks. More so last week than this week, but we are getting closer to the Rangers game on Sunday. There's a lot of debate around, what would be showing class or what wouldn't be showing class, depending on whether we do this Guard of Honour or not. Before I reiterate my thoughts on it, what are your thoughts? I see a little smile coming across your face, so I'm wondering what's coming here. What do you think?
No, I think I've got maybe an unpopular opinion. I don't think you should have any. Some of the comments I've heard of this is people just giving a sort of knee-jerk reaction to this stuff. It's not mandatory. It's optional. It's a custom and practice thing. Now, I don't actually know what the custom and practice is. We've had 9 years where we've won the league. I don't know what's happened in those 9 years. Which game is it you're meant to do this Guard of Honour? Is it the game after the team have won the league? Is it every single game for the rest of the season? Is it the last game of the season where they give them the trophy? Is it the first game of the new season where you're putting the flag up? I don't know. So it'd be actually interesting to know what's happened over the last 9 years. So I think there was a picture of the Hamilton team giving Celtic a Guard of Honour in the first game of this season. So I think if you're going to give a Guard of Honour, then likely the first game of the season, when you're putting the flag up, would be the way to go. But if somebody can look back for the last 9 years, and if it is custom and practice, that the game after the team wins the league, you give them a Guard of Honour, then I think we should do it, no matter who the team is, if that's the custom and practice. If it's not the custom and practice, then you don't do it. Because the other thing I was looking at some of the comments last week, which I didn't like, this idea about, they go low, we go high, and take the high moral ground. You set your own standards. You don't set your standards according to other people. And I get annoyed at Peter Law, again, statement back in December talking about values. And on the podcast at the time I said, what is he talking about, values? Explain that to me. What do values mean? But just to follow on from Tony's point, you set your own values, you set your own standards. If it's custom and practice, I think you do it, no matter who it is, whether you like that particular team or their fans or whatever. If it's custom and practice, you do it. If it's not custom and practice, you don't do it. That's my view.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Yeah, to be absolutely honest, that's the first time I've heard anybody say anything along those lines, and I think it makes the most sense. It's regardless of the morality behind it or whether you think it shows respect or not, or this or that. It's more about, if you're going to bother doing it at all, define when you're doing it. I personally, I've said already, I couldn't really care either way. I don't think it makes a huge difference to either set of players. I do think, agreement with you, it probably makes more sense from a ceremonial point of view to do it on the day that the team is unfurling the league flag. I don't think it's necessary to do it at any other time, and that's not just me saying that because we would have to do it on Sunday. I think to standardise it in that way would probably make more sense. Tony, to me that's a really interesting point and not one I've seen before. What's your thoughts on that?
I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Nailed it for me there, Jim. I would like to see that. And I kind of with you on that. If it's I would do it the first game of the season when you unfurl the flag. You know, that way you would never have Celtic and Rangers game, the first game of the season, so you would never have this dispute anyway, would you? So-called argument. Again, everyone's getting dragged into something that maybe they shouldn't be, you know. But yeah, let's find out exactly when this Guard of Honour is meant to be done, and then stick with that. I totally agree with that. You know, and if it is practice, a custom practice, Jim says, then we do it. If it's not, we don't.
Yep.
End off. I like that argument. I hadn't thought of that, and that's why I'm on with King Jim, because I learn stuff.
I used to run football teams, kids teams, and what you said to the kids was during the game, get stuck in, try and win the game, and after the game you try and shake hands with as many of the opposition as possible, even if you hate them, even if they kick you off the park. It doesn't matter. During the game, you're bitter rivals and you want to go out and win. After the game, they'll just let you shake hands and off you go. So I don't think, again, we shouldn't be looking to anyone else to set our standards. No. Part of the Celtic song is, we don't care what blah, blah, blah. We don't care what anyone else does. Again, that's just following on from Tony's point. We set our own standards here. And anyway, that's it.
100%. I couldn't have put it any better. I think if we decide to do it because we think it shows a certain level of class, you're still allowing somebody else to dictate what you do just because they haven't done it or whatever.
Don't do it to try and make a point. Never do that. Never do something to make a point. Do something because it's the right thing to do. And if you take flack from it, then that's okay. But you've done the right thing.
Yep, 100%. I think that sums it up. I think if anything, and it just shows you as well, you know, we've talked about it ad nauseum on this podcast for a couple of weeks now, and there's Jim come on and raised a valid, fresh point on it. So it's great to get everybody's thoughts.
The point, Laura, last week is you saw people getting on TV, people like Gary Caldwell, and that's a knee-jerk reaction. John Hughes, that's a knee-jerk reaction because you don't know what a Guard of Honour is. They're just spouting the first thing you can think of. Should they do a Guard of Honour? Oh yeah, they should do that. They haven't thought that through, and it's lazy and it's weak. And the point I made at the start of the podcast, that's why I don't listen to people like Gary Caldwell. Now, don't get me wrong, he's put at the top level of the game, and I respect everything the guy's done. But would I listen to him? Don't think so.
I wouldn't particularly listen to him either, I have to say. But we'll.
High opinion of you, Jim.
I know he's sitting somewhere gutted now, you know. But we'll move on anyway. The next thing I wanted to talk about today, it was breaking news yesterday during the bulletin actually. Declan's phone was ringing off the hook on the show if you were watching it. It was announced about lunchtime yesterday that Luke O'Connell had joined Queen's Park on loan. Now, I have to admit I was pretty shocked by it. I thought we went to a lot of lengths to get him in from Bolton. We gave them money that they didn't even particularly, you know, they weren't entitled to, but, you know, from a club morals point of view, I think Celtic offered them money for him to help with their own financial situation, and we did that partly as well to secure his services because he was sought after by a lot of other clubs. So I was quite surprised to see him let go, but then when I think about it, not in the context of the way he's been treated since he came to the club. Tony, I'll come to you first. What were your first thoughts when you heard the news that Luke O'Connell was going out, and what do you think it signifies in a wider sense for players' development at the club?
There's a guy in my local boozer, you know how you get local boozers and you get the Barstool preachers and the kind of the Nietzsche's, the philosophers, the Platos and all that. He had a great expression for somebody getting a raw deal, and he would say, you've got the broad end of the ragman's trumpet. He used to say, right, now Jim, I remember the ragman. You know, so Luke O'Connell has ran out to the ragman, presented a pristine Subbuteo set, and he's been given a left-footed roller skate with no wheel, right? The man called Pat the Hat, I'll credit him, he's always got great names, these guys, the broad end of the ragman's trumpet. There's something's not right at Celtic if you let a guy like that, who was playing championship football with Bolton, and he's now at Queen's Park. Now, Jim touched on this a few weeks ago, we're talking about coaching and players regressing. We've spoken about it as well. Something has happened to Luke O'Connell at Celtic. Now, surely this is the optimum time to play a player like Luke O'Connell. Because he looked okay in the pre-season match when people saw him. He picked up the ball. You think you can tell a football player, but he looked quite comfortable. Okay, pre-season games aren't any great barometer, but you know a player's comfortable with a ball at his feet and he can ping a pass, and you think, I'd like to see more of that young guy. You see, highly sought after, paid money to Bolton for him, which they shouldn't have paid. But how come Luke O'Connell hasn't got the last few games to let's see what he can do, to let any new incoming manager see what he can do? Yeah, these kind of, and also, see if Celtic are managerless and rudderless at the moment. Who's taken that decision to punt Luke O'Connell to Queen's Park? Who has made that decision? I would like to know that. Again, getting back to what Jim said, who's signing these players? Who's taking these kind of decisions? I think all the Celtic fans want to know that, because I think Luke O'Connell in particular was a player that people had high hopes for. And I think there's a bit of talent there, but you'll never know, because Celtic haven't given him a fair crack at the whip.
Yeah, I think that's certainly my initial impression of it anyway. Jim, I think we do suffer a little bit from having to play a guessing game as far as these concerns. We don't know all the circumstances behind why Luke O'Connell might not have been given a shot, whether it's club related or whether it's down to the individual himself. Do you think it speaks to a larger issue with the way that young players are being developed at the club, or do you think this is an individual issue of a player that's not just worked out for?
It's maybe a bit of both, Laura, just to echo Tony's comments again. All I've seen him was that second half against Hibs at the start of or before the season started, and he looked really good. He looked kind of half decent. So why he's not got a game? I can understand, we've got a huge squad, so he's massively down the pecking order. But we could use 5 subs this year again, but maybe there wasn't a game that we put to bed to get Luke O'Connell on. And because you gave us our what we're going to talk about today, I thought we'd go and check up to see what Luke O'Connell's actually done. And he only played 10 games for Bolton. So, in his whole career, he's only played 10 and a half games, really, which is astonishing. And if you look at O'Connell, you're thinking, what kind of future do you have? So, again, you're looking at how Celtic try to develop players. He should have been put out on loan at the start of the season. But I think this also goes back to a lack of vision in the club, a lack of strategy in the club, a lack of most things. Because what I was going to mention last week, if I was on, was the fact that virtually every podcast we're talking about there's going to be a major rebuild necessary this year. Take a wee step back for that. Why should there be a major rebuild? If you've got some sort of strategy, if you've got some sort of vision, you wouldn't be looking to have a major rebuild every year. You maybe want to add 2 or 3 players to the squad, but not a major rebuild. And that goes back to taking on all these loan players and maybe not letting players go who wanted to go, bringing in other guys and longer term contracts. I just think the club's a shambles. I know I keep sounding negative. It's hard not to sound negative, but Luke O'Connell's a good example of that, I think, because Luke O'Connell looks a decent player. We should have had some sort of plan for him. If he wasn't going to feature, because I think we've got a squad for about 30. So in any one weekend, if you get 5 subs coming on, you're talking about, if you used all your 5 subs, only 6 of those players would get a full game, 5 would get less than half a game, 5 would get more than half a game. And then the rest of your 30 are sitting doing nothing. You have to have some sort of game plan for them, whether it's having a coach league or a B-team league or something. There needs to be some sort of plan. And Luke O'Connell, like loads of young, talented players, is having to suffer for that, because for all we know, he's another David Turnbull. For all we know. We'll never know.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Just apologies if anybody listening can hear my neighbours having the loudest conversation in the world out the window. I don't know what the hell's going on, but we'll crack on regardless. Tony, Jim's brought up a lot of good points about what it says about the wider issues around player development and what that means at the club, but trying to put a bit of a more positive spin on it for the individual himself. Do you think this move for Luke O'Connell will be a good thing, and do you think, more importantly for us, will it signify getting the sort of opportunity that he needs to maybe resurrect his Celtic career if and when he does come back?
I would have thought if Luke O'Connell would go out on loan, he could have went to a championship club. I'm surprised that he's going to Queen's Park first and foremost. there's that standard. I mean, he'll play competitive football. That's one thing. We'll toughen him up, yeah. But I'd rather see him play competitive football in the Championship, because I think obviously that's levels up from Queen's Park. So that would toughen him up even more and give him a better chance to make an impression of Celtic when he comes back. But I mean, the only good thing is he'll have games, he'll have game time, and let's see what he does when he's out there. But I'm just surprised at the fact that he's gone to Queen's Park. Surely a Championship club would have snapped Celtic's hand off for him. And then going back to Jim's point, that should have been part of the plan for Luke O'Connell, to go to a Championship club, maybe even a Premiership club where he doesn't play against Celtic. Because Ryan Christie went to Aberdeen, didn't he, and stuff like that. So, that kind of thing. So, surely the Celtic aren't that rudderless that they can't kind of sort some kind of deal out like that where he can play at the standard that he's going to be playing at and improve. And then let's see. Because you're not going to learn much about Luke O'Connell when he goes to Queen's Park, because you're expecting him to be good for Queen's Park. He's on a hiding to nothing there.
Yeah. I think it wouldn't be a surprise if he does play outstanding at that kind of level, but like you say, it doesn't indicate very much in terms of
I think also, Laura, just to take on that point, there's a lot of chat about putting in a Colts team, which putting a Colts team into League Two, and I'm not so sure that's such a great idea because of that very point, because of the quality of opposition. I don't think they would learn very much from that at all. They're putting against part-time teams, they're training twice a week, so the standard's not very good. I mean, if it's up to me, I'd have some sort of B team playing against other B teams just to keep people involved and keeping them match fit, etc. I'm not a big fan of Colts team in League Two. That's a good idea. And I heard Amy the other day talking about how unfair that was to all the other teams who are in, the 5th, 6th, 7th tier. I'm not a fan of that one.
Yeah, it's an interesting point to raise, Tony. I'll get your thoughts on it as well. I think my personal opinion is much more in line with Jim's than what I've seen other people saying. I think from a very Celtic-centric point of view, you could argue that it's good for the development of our players and that it's good for our club. And I saw Paul raise a point yesterday that should impact Scottish football more widely because of the number of Celtic and Rangers players that end up playing at other clubs. But as Jim says, the level that they're playing at, is that going to be much higher than youth football? Is it going to be much different? And is it fair to the other clubs? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I agree with Jim. I don't think it's fair to other clubs. The only benefit you get is players playing competitive football. That's it. Right? And get some kind of fitness and match fitness about them, and game fitness and game awareness. That's it. I don't see any other benefit, but the standard is not the best, and when they come up, there will still be a big gap to fill there if you're going to go from League Two football to playing Premiership football. It speaks for itself. Well, yeah, and I think it's a selfish driver, this Celtic and Rangers Colts teams. It really is. It's benefiting two clubs. Let's not kid ourselves. So, I'm like Jim. I'm against it as well. I
would much rather have a B team and try and play against English under 23 teams, something like that, because the standard is higher. And I think if you're a Celtic playing in League Two, you're going to be, lots of guys might want to make a bit of a name for themselves, maybe a target for people, and the standard is poor. The pitches will be poor as well. I just don't see that as a good idea at all. If we could get friendly matches against England under 23 teams, I think that would be a far better idea. But I think also if you're going to have a B team, that then raises the question about your whole youth development. Do you actually want a Lennoxtown for young guys, or do you just forget that we'll have an A and a B team and we'll just sign players rather than try to develop our own? But that's a much bigger thing, and hopefully whoever we get as a director of football, or a manager, or head coach, if they've got the vision to take that one forward.
Bring back the Anglo-Scottish Cup, Jim, for the B teams and the under-23s in England.
You've gone too far there, Tony. You've gone too far.
when Celtic lose to the likes of Burnley and Rangers to Chesterfield. Glory days.
The Texaco Cup. Are you too young for that, Tony? The Texaco Cup?
No, it's just slightly.
I am thankfully too young for that. I don't remember what sounds pretty horrific there, but we'll swiftly move on from
get in there.
Well, I just wanted to highlight, thanks to everybody making their comments on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Jim Hanaway has posted, I posted on here a while ago, Jim's points changed my mind on Sunday, has no precedent, first game of the new season for me now. So I think there's a lot of people coming to that conclusion that, you know, that sets a consistency as far as the Guard of Honour is concerned that I think is a lot more understandable and a lot more or a lot less flammable, if you like, than the current situation. And like you say, Tony, it would practically guarantee that in a league where there's only really two teams likely to win the league, they're not going to meet each other in the first game of the season, and so it would make sense from a safety point of view and from a point scoring point of view not to do that. But we'll move on.
My people have spoken. Good.
Yes, Jim's people have spoken. The king has spoken, and his subjects have agreed. So,
but last week, long live the king this week. I think that's what they're saying, Jim.
Good.
Oh, right. So the next point I wanted to bring up now, we had I try and plan a little bit, even though it maybe doesn't look that way. Try and plan a little bit what we're going to talk about and give you guys a bit of heads up about what we're going to talk about. And unfortunately,
Laura's homework time. Good. Okay.
Yes, my homework time. Get it in, get it marked. I'll give you a big green tick or a big red cross. But 2 hours or so before the show was due to go on air, I was checking the Celtic News Now feed, and there was a tweet from a German journalist who works for Bild, which is the big, I don't know if it's just a sports newspaper, but it's certainly a big German publication, who said he had information that Jesse Marsh, who has been a kind of relatively new name on the scene, a disciple of Ralph Rangnick, who it was suggested might be in the running for the Celtic job. Now, we were going to talk about what our thoughts were on what he could possibly offer, for good or for bad. I know Tony's got some thoughts, which I'll come to in a minute. But this journalist seems to have suggested that he has actually contacted the club to specifically rule himself out of contention. Now that's a pretty bold move to make, considering some of the statements he was making about the honour of being connected with Celtic. I don't know what it does to his relationship with Celtic, considering it's come out this week that he was supported in sponsorship for getting some of his licensing badges and some stuff by Celtic when he was going through his UEFA courses. So it's all a bit, all come as a bit of a shock to me, to be honest. Tony, I'll come to you. First of all, what did you make when you saw that news that he had specifically ruled himself out? And more widely, what are your thoughts about what he was as a potential candidate and what that means for our club going forward?
I think everybody got excited when Jesse Marsh started speaking about Celtic and the possibility that he might want to talk. Now, Jesse Marsh has probably seen all this in print and thought, that's kind of, and whatever he's did today through Bild, then he's put the kibosh on it, and it's purely up to him. So Celtic haven't even had the chance to ask him the question, because if Jesse Marsh from the other day, statements from the other day, he was a person of interest who would have spoken. So he's usually, if he's ruled himself out, then so be it. But I want Celtic to come out and tell me that he's ruled himself out, not a German newspaper or whatever, or Jesse Marsh himself to comment and say, I'm ruling myself out. I've got unfinished business at Salzburg, it's all very forked tongue, so, but he would have been a person of interest. Now, my take on all of this managerial stuff is that's the candidate that Celtic fans want. Guy like that. Eddie Howe also fits into that category for me. Roberto Martinez as well. Ralph Rangnick himself. So if any of these guys would be interested, then you have to talk. Just show real gumption and ambition and get these guys round a table, see what they could do, because they could set the ball in motion managerially for Celtic for years to come. Right, you get a chance here to come in, and it's not just domestic success at Celtic, but you want to reawaken a sleeping giant in terms of European football. So any of these guys, the board must see what they can bring to the table. And I've said this before. See, if you get it right at Celtic, you don't need to go anywhere else. Mm-hmm. This is a manager's dream club, and if you let them get on with it, it's a wonderful football club. And the people at the top have to see that. And see, if you're getting in and you're going to ask any of these guys the question, then you can't low ball it. No glass ceilings, no financial parameters, right? You've got the chance here to make Celtic, well, every Celtic fan wants Celtic to become a feared and respected force in Europe again. That's all they want, right? And the board have got the chance to do that by making an ambitious decision that will help this club move forward, right? So if you're going to just, say for instance, if you're going to pitch it to an Eddie Howe, you can't be letting the supporters down by lowballing it. My mate, I've got a pal, Ross McFarlane, who's a drummer, played for 2 successful Scottish bands, and he once said to me, see if Celtic were a record label, they would be Motown. And they did that, you know, and I burst out laughing. But he's right. Celtic's pure soul, right? They've got an illustrious history and an incredible backstory. The club's a fairy tale. We've got worldwide appeal, success and winnings in their DNA. You tap into all of that. That's how you go and get an Eddie Howe. And see, if you meet Eddie Howe or Ralph Rangnick or Roberto Martinez, see that meeting, they have to come away with Celtic in their fingernails and in their skin, right? See, you're talking to them, you say to them, see that fever you've got right now, it's Celtic. See that itch you've got, it's Celtic, right? See that feeling.
I certainly hope it's Celtic.
Well,
otherwise you might need cream for that.
See that feeling in your bones, Celtic, right? See, if you imagine if you were the manager of that club, where you could take us, what you could do. We're asking you to shape the destiny and the future of this football club. If they don't walk away from a table or a meeting feeling like that, and see the people that are talking to them, they're no fit for purpose. Mm-hmm. They don't get it, and they're selling you an eye shot, and they're selling the club shot, right? That DNA thing, right? Larson stayed for 7 years because they get into his DNA, right? Mm-hmm. And as Jock Stein famously said, Celtic weren't their first love, but they'll be my last love. You can pitch it that way to a top managerial candidate. You see, if you don't, well, I'll say 3 words. 3 words. Ambition, ambition, ambition.
Yeah.
And if you don't, what do you get? You'll get the managerial equivalent at the broad end of the ragman's trumpet.
Well, Jim, great point raised there by Tony, and you know, Paul's just proved exactly what he's talking about there by putting the comment up that we just saw. We did approach Ralph Rangnick to appear on the podcast, and unfortunately, busy man as he is, he's not able to do so. And I think that explains and exhibits exactly the type of behaviour that we're talking about. What is the harm in asking these people the question? I watched a video with Jesse Marsh on a YouTube channel that I watched called A Coach's Voice. And honestly, like, if you were a Celtic supporter of any calibre, you'd be watching it and your face would be one of those emojis with the love heart eyes. The way that he was talking about the culture of a club, understanding that, getting into the way the local people feel about that club, it would have been ideal to me, both for his tactical knowledge and what he was obviously wanting to bring to the game in terms of fresh ideas, but also his understanding that a club is about more than just the football on the pitch. He actually pretty much paraphrased the famous Tommy Burns quote about playing for a people and a cause, and I couldn't believe it as I was sitting there listening to it. So I would recommend that interview to anyone that hasn't seen it. It's about 8 months old now. But just to pick up on what Tony said, Jim, what are your thoughts on the whole Jesse Marsh situation, about the fact that he specifically ruled himself out, which does concern me a little bit, and your thoughts in general about what a coach of his calibre would mean for our club?
I think Tony articulates very well the expectations of the Celtic fans. I'm not sure those expectations are matched by those in power. That's my concern. As the oldest member of the ACSOM team, I've been watching football for over 50 years. And the nation I admire the most are the Germans. Tactically, technically, physically, psychologically, they're the exemplar nation of the world. They might not always be the top team, but they are the guys to copy. And over the last 10 years, Ralph Rangnick has revolutionised German football. So I'm a big Ralphie fanboy. And I said a few months ago, I didn't think we would get him because I think he's out of our league. He's a very sought-after man throughout Europe. And what I said a couple of months ago was basically, could we have got him in on a consultancy basis to review the club from top to bottom and make some recommendations, not only on the future structure, but maybe actual people who could come in and do a job? Because the thing is, I know quite a lot about a few things, but there's loads of things I don't know very much about. So I don't know how to go about putting in a structure for a modern football team, and actually doubt those at Celtic Park know that as well. Because people like Roy Keane are getting mentioned, they have no idea what they're doing.
Yep.
So I'd like somebody to come in and have a good look at the club, structure, vision, strategy, culture, all that kind of stuff. And if Ralph Rangnick had maybe done that, he might have got a wee kind of feel for it. He might have got a wee taste for it, maybe. But what I also said a few months ago, there are loads and loads of Rangnick mini-me's out there. And Jesse Marsh is another Rangnick mini-me. I would go out and get a Rangnick mini-me in there, because the most important thing is the structure of the club. And the more you think about the future of the club, it's like a big jigsaw. Basically, what we can't do if you're a modern club is continue to hire a manager, sack a manager and all his backroom staff. A new guy comes in, he's got a different way of playing. We redo the whole youth structure. The whole thing's just a complete mess. It's like a big jigsaw. And a head coach, and I think we'll go the Dorf head coach route. And what we need is some jigsaw, maybe a big 12-piece saw with your fitness and analytics and recruitment and all that stuff. And there's one piece of the jigsaw, it's the head coach. And you put that head coach in to finish the jigsaw. And if he leaves, you've only got one piece missing, you put a new piece in. But for me, I would go for a Rangnick mini-me. I don't know who they are. They're out there. There's at least 20 people that I've seen who have either coached alongside Rangnick or are close to Rangnick. And Rangnick would know who the guys are. Talk to Rangnick, not about taking the Celtic job on, that'd be great. But who would he recommend? Talk to people who know what's happening. Because if I know if my car is on the blink, I can't fix it. I go to somebody who knows what they're talking about and they'll fix the car. I don't think the Celtic board know how to have a modern football team. Go and talk to people who are doing that. Because if you're entertaining people like Roy Keane, forget it.
Yeah.
I agree with Jim. We've got a chance to reinvent the Celtic managerial wheel here, right? And take us forward, right? And as you say, if somebody goes, it's continuity we've got, Jim. Get that structure and culture in place. You know, where if, as you say, a manager leaves, it's not that much of a rebuild, as you say, right? So you have to grasp that nettle and that opportunity to do that. As Jim said, you talk to everybody, you talk to the Ralph Rangnicks of this world. You even say to Jesse Marsh as well, like, who do you recommend? Or
who do you recommend?
Forward? You know, go to these people, because all the club want is just to be successful at home and in Europe as well, you know, and die trying to emulate the most successful Scottish football club that ever lived, right? You might never get there. Yeah. They can accept that they're trying and they're striving to get there. The supporters will accept that for time and perpetual motion, that every day that you go through those glass doors, you're looking up to them and saying, we're going to give our all. You might never ever win it again, probably not, but we're striving to be that good, and at least everybody's pulling in that direction to do that. And Celtic will accept that. Yeah, there'll be failures along the way, but we'll accept at least that they're striving to be the best that they can possibly be. And that's what a new management structure, this new EOF head coach structure can bringing that continuity moving forward, where football seasons are laid out in plans, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, 7-year plan, call it what you like. That's what these guys can bring.
I said a few weeks ago, Laura, that football more and more is becoming like chess. And I'd be surprised if most of the top coaches are not good chess players. Because it's all about being analytical and methodical. You know, it's not about standing at the side of the park shouting at players, come on, get your finger out your arse. You know, that's old style stuff. You know, it's all about where the players are on the pitch. I watched about half an hour of that match last night. And Slavia Prague, they knew where to stand. They give him the ball. This guy will move. He'll get the ball. He'll move around. And they were never flustered. They just knew where to be. And you watch Celtic this season, it's been shambolic. Don't know what they're doing half the time. So it's a bit about being methodical and analytical. And we need a modern coach to do that, because that's the future of football. Your Roy Keane's of this world, Neil Lennon's of this world, Mick McCarthy's, these guys. No, not for me. Of the ones in the UK, I'm taking more and more to Howe. I think Howe would be not a bad bet, because the thing that, again, when you look at kind of old style football managers, they say things like Neil Lennon is a winner. He's got a high win percentage ratio. He knows how to win. But you have to put that in context. You would expect the team Neil Lennon's managed to win. You want somebody who has exceeded expectations. And if you line up Neil Lennon against Eddie Howe, people are saying, what's he won, Eddie Howe? His win percentage is really low. But in terms of exceeding expectations, Howe's in a different stratosphere compared to Lennon. Because if you're a Bournemouth fan 10 years ago, what's your expectations as a Bournemouth fan? You might have been thinking top half of League One, maybe bottom half of the Championship. He takes them to the Premiership. He keeps them in the Premiership, puts them in the top half of the Premiership. That's an astonishing thing to do. So if it's a UK manager, I think Howe's maybe the top of my list. Maresca was mentioned, I wasn't on last week, he was mentioned, and people are saying, well, look at the under-23s of Man City. They're the richest club in the UK. Most of that under-23 team will be paid more than the Celtic players. So I don't know much about the guy, but again, I wouldn't put that forward as an argument. In the same way that Sean Maloney talks good in the sports scene and Roy Keane's a Celtic legend. That's old style thinking. We have to move with the times. And I think whoever we get, it'll be a big statement. If we get a Roy Keane type manager, I think, as Tony said, the people in charge are not fit for purpose. If we get a modern manager and it doesn't work out, I'll be absolutely fine with that, because I can see where they're going. I can understand the logic. And Tony's old enough, and maybe you're old enough, Laura, to remember when Rangers brought in Paul Le Guen, and he was the hottest ticket in Europe. And you thought, whoa, we're in big trouble here. And it just flopped. There was lots of reasons why it flopped. So there's no guarantee. But if we'd have got a Paul Le Guen type manager now, you would say, well done, Celtic board. It's going to move on, and hopefully things will get. So, but just make a sensible appointment. And I forget the one Tony said, was it a good appointment or a disappointment type thing? I'm just going to quote you from now on, Tony. Rip-roaring, free-scoring, blah, blah, blah. So,
see, the Celtic fans want an appointment, not a disappointment. Yeah.
That's the one.
Between all your slogans, Tony will be... between all Tony's stories and slogans, I'll be tweets don't win trumpets or something like that. I'm baffled. I'm absolutely baffled. But I tell you, the thing that really surprised me about the Jesse Marsh interview that I was watching was he talked about at one point, he said, we start with the simple things when I come into a new club. We start by teaching them 8 different sets of tactics for the various situations they'll come up against in a game. And I thought to myself, I would be highly surprised if that Neil Lennon side, I mean, they don't look as if they know one set of tactics, never mind an attacking set of tactics and a defensive set of tactics. So, you're talking about 2 different coaches playing 2 different sports, as far as I'm concerned, if that's the kind of level that you're talking about. And like you say, Jim... And
that's where the chess comes in, Laura. That's where the chess comes in. Because chess, I mean, if anyone doesn't play chess, go and play chess. Chess is a fantastic game. And chess is all about making sure nobody gets through your defence. You try and pick holes in the other person's defence. You try and get the midfield controlled. It was very similar to football, basically. And that's why I've said I think all the best coaches will be good chess players. And I never saw the Jesse Marsh interview, but I'm not surprised about that's the kind of things that he's saying, because it's all about being on the right part of the pitch at the right time, knowing to pick out the right pass, etc. And it's about coaching people into doing that. So you don't have to have loads of medals to do that. In fact, you don't even have to have much football experience at all. You could be a maths person, a numbers person. So we have to think modern thinking. As I said, the old style Roy Keane, Neil Lennon thing, that's so last decade.
Good chess players can play 8 games at a time as well, Jim.
Yeah, and they're also 5 or 6 moves ahead.
Yeah, correct. And also as well, you define success. Success is not silverware and trophies. You talk about Eddie Howe keeping Bournemouth up in that Premier League for 5 years. That's success. As you say, 10 years ago, Bournemouth was what? A seaside town. Wasn't a football club, was it? It wasn't renowned for its football. So that's...
Well, you say, Tony, could Neil Lennon have done what Eddie Howe's done? I would say no. Could Eddie Howe have done what Neil Lennon did? I'd say yes.
Yeah.
I would say that too. And you're talking about... You keep going on about it, but it's bringing that culture into a football club. Moving with the times, constantly evolving. Guys like Eddie Howe and the people, Jesse Marsh that you mentioned, Laura, yourself talking there. These are, you say, analytics. The Germans are the best at that. They just are. You'll not beat them.
Have they been in something like they've appeared at every semi-final of the World Cup since 1982? I might be absolutely butchering that particular fact, but it is something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. So that tells you all you need to know, doesn't it?
Yep.
So why not go and see to Jesse Marsh and Ralph Rangnick, like what should we be doing here? Bring them in on a consultancy basis, or just talk to them. You don't need to tell anybody you're doing it. But talk to everybody that can help you moving forward. Everybody. And they'll only be... It's the most flattering thing in the world, being asked your advice on how to do something. So when if Celtic approach these people and then through the information and the education that they get, they will appoint the right people, or they should. It should say, right, that leads us to this candidate. And I go back to what Jim said, that Roy Keane, Lampard, all these other people, they just turn you off. Something terrible. You just think to yourself, please, God, no.
Yeah. I think we're all in...
Whoever they appoint has to be evidence-based. Has to be evidence to say, that's why we're appointing this guy. Here's the evidence. And the Roy Keane, I think Paul would mention that he's only coached or only managed 180 games or something. That's mostly in the Championship. There's no evidence there. There's no evidence with Lampard. There's no evidence with all these guys. But I think if we end up with this Dove head coach structure, then that's a completely different structure altogether. And you need people with different skill sets in there. And as I said, as long as they make the appointment on a sensible basis, then you'll support whatever they do. If it falls flat in its face, hey-ho, that's football. These things happen. But make a sensible appointment. And I think what we whittled on about last season was that, the May 2019 appointment wasn't too clever. And that's why we're talking about it. That's why the season's been so bad. We made one very bad decision, and all these things have came from that bad decision. So don't do it again.
Learn from your mistakes. Learn from the biggest mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good way to move on to the last talking point of the show that I was thinking about bringing up. I was talking to you, Tony, just before we came on air about some recent clamourings that I've seen from certain Celtic fans to bring a certain Jordan Larsson. I nearly said back to Celtic. I don't mean that in any sense because he's never played for us in his life. But there does seem some sort of clamouring online based off what I can only assume is a few nice looking goals on YouTube that he scored for Spartak Moscow. Bring him home was the phrase that was getting used and that kind of thing. Now there's a few reasons I believe that's not really something that we want to do, but I'll leave it up to you first of all to give your thoughts before I venture my own. What are your thoughts on Jordan Larsson and the whole clamour to bring him to Celtic Park?
Sentimentality is not for me on this one, Laura. His father was the ultimate goal scoring legend, 252 and 315 games. Players suffer from that. Paul Dalglish suffered from forever being compared to King Kenny.
Yep.
Jordan Larsson, whatever people think, bring him home and all that, it's not for me. He has to first and foremost prove that he's good enough to play in a Celtic jersey. A couple of goals on YouTube doesn't make him a star at. I'm sure I could dig out some of my goals from playing for East Kilbride Rovers or something,
That's next week's programme, brilliant.
Or Real Imaginary, you know what I mean? Something like that. So I can't see this one. I can see where people are coming from, but I would not want it to happen. Because I think it'd be unfair on the boy as well for a start. But I don't think that Celtic have ever shown any interest in Jordan Larsson as a viable striking option for the club.
Yep.
You know, I just think that sentimentality and emotional decisions like that, they can be bad decisions, as Jim just spoke about, a bad decision that was made on emotion and sentiment, managerial wise. So, and Celtic have suffered because of that decision. So, no, it's a no from me in a Dragon's Den style to Jordan Larsson coming to Celtic.
I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out.
Jim, what are your thoughts on it? I have to say, I'm in complete agreement with Tony. I saw it and it kind of echoed the sentiments that I thought we talked about a couple of weeks ago regarding the whole Maloney thing from Belgium. We don't really know what he's done, what effect he would have, and everything that is being sort of dictated to by sentiment, and that's leaving alone the fact that the guy will never live up to his dad's reputation in terms of Celtic supporters. He could come in and score 40 goals next season and he'd still have another 6 years to go before he would even come close to his father's legacy. So, first of all, specifically for him, is he a player you would like to see play for Celtic one day? And also, just to echo Tony's thoughts, what do you think it says about our wider approach to how we bring people into the club?
I said earlier that I don't listen to phone-ins, I don't read papers, because I despair of this kind of stuff. It's just stupid, I think. If I think one word, it's just stupid. Right? Because basically what you want to buy a good player that you can afford. And if that's somebody called Jordan Larsson, then fair enough. But to pick somebody because of his name, I just don't get that. And was it not the fact he went for about £10 million or something ridiculous like that? You know, even that rules him out. And I totally despair of this kind of stuff. And it's old school, lazy thinking. You know, I understand why people do it. Look at Larsson's son, he's really good. That's great. If he was coming through the youth team, fair enough, give him his chance. But you're not going to spend silly money on somebody because of his name. As I said, I just despair of that kind of stuff. And it's the same old style thinking that makes you go for old style managers, you know. So that's a no from me. I'm out as well. I'm with Tony, I'm out.
Apart from King Jim, because he's up there with King Kenny, you know what I mean? There's only two people have that moniker.
That's
you
us.
Know what I mean? That's
we're on the top shelf today, Tony. I'm on the top shelf. You're down there.
I'm down here.
So what we've concluded today from our conversations is that we're going to have Jordan Larsson not able to hit a cow's backside with a banjo with Roy Keane on the sidelines telling him to get his finger out his arse. That's basically where we're going to be at next season.
I didn't say that about Jordan Larsson. Didn't say that. I just said that kind of talk is a bit despairing, is what I said.
Yes.
You could quite well hit a cow's arse with a banjo, depending how big the coup is, how big the banjo is. So, you know.
Or a trumpet. So
don't misquote me, Laura. Don't misquote me. Don't speak for me.
Something. I'm just get banjos
and
John
Dyke
and all
speaks for me.
sorts.
You don't speak for me.
Yes, remember we've had to run all this by Paul before we put any of it out, or so Twitter seems to think anyway. But we will leave it there for today. That is an hour that has absolutely flown in. So thank you to gents for another great afternoon talking all things Celtic. Thank you to everybody in the comments for watching on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. 500 shows. God knows if we'll do another 500 at this rate after this carry on today. But anyway, we'll leave you there and say thank you very much for watching, and we will see you on Sunday for the big game.